Resume recording. For the people on the recording, your homework is going to be this exercise 2 graph editor arrow in your in-class files. But for now, I'm going to remove this. And we have Maya here. I've got a box. If I hit play on this box, it moves. Can you guys see that? Is it coming in patchy or anything?
I don't know, we might be dropping a couple frames, but it seems fine.
Let me double check here. I want y'all to be able to see it. It's going to be important for the pop quiz. It doesn't matter. Is that any better?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So today we're going to be working in the graph editor pretty much exclusively. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can change based on just how we change things in the graph editor, from our timing, the different speed, how we craft the arcs. We can shift motion in different directions just by changing our curve. And we can pretty much determine the entire animation with just the graph editor. By changing how it works, by increasing curves, we can either slow down or speed up individual sections of our animation. But most importantly, we can change things pretty quickly and efficiently as a next step to animation. So our first step that we normally do is just setting our keyframes. So this box here has a keyframe on frame 1 and frame 48. So that would be the first step in us creating an animation. We've got our main base keys, and we have our in-betweens, which is what Maya does with the graph editor, all the way through that. And how the graph is built will change how it works. So if I were to come up here, just so it's easier for you guys to see, I'm going to switch to my animation tab. So here's our graph. This is the kind of standard Maya in-betweening graph that we have inside of Maya. She has a nice slow in, a nice slow out, and just a nice little arcing curve all the way across. We can take an even better look at that by coming into our translate, and we can really see that curve and its nice gentle slopes. So let's dive in and just see what we could do to change how this graph editor works based off the tools. So there's a whole bunch of different tools in here. So under edit, these are all pretty standard: undo, cut, copy, paste. We also have select curve nodes and remove curve color. So this will just change how this kind of works a little bit. We can also set our curve colors. So if you're like, I really don't like this red, you can change it to pink, to black, to white. So mine will now be white, just so it's a little easier for you guys to see with this curve. So under view, view is where we see how different things are actually viewed. So we can undo my view change, which is Alt-Z. See if it'll let me do it. No, it won't. We can turn on things like auto framing. We can show different things. We can turn on, do we want to see our keys? Currently it's set to yes, of course we do. But if we turn off never, then we won't see how the keys are interacting. We can also turn on different views. So do we want to see them all combined, normaled, or an absolute? This is the one that we are used to. We then have select. This is just what would you like to be able to select inside of our graph editor. So do you want to be able to select the curves, the keys, the in tangent, those little handles, or the out tangent, the other handle? I'd recommend turning these off or on based on if you want certain things to not be able to be clickable. So currently, if I wanted to select one curve, I could just click on it, and then that's the curve that I would be interacting with. Same with handles. If I wanted to interact with a handle, I could click on it. change things with the handles. If I didn't want to be able to select those in or out tangents, I could turn that off. And now I can't select those. We then have our curves. These are all of the different properties for the curves themselves. So you can change how they work with filters. You can change if you want to isolate or bake the channel. Baking pretty much sets a keyframe on every frame to make sure it always looks the same regardless. Do you want to mute the channels? So muting channels works pretty cool. Pretty much you could be like, hey, I don't want to ever be able to interact with this one channel while I'm working. You can turn that off and on here. We're going to skip a couple now. Go to list. This is pretty standard. What do you want to be able to see in your list? So do you want to auto load your selected? Do you want to have everything selected? Do you want to make any bookmarks for certain things over here that you see? This is mostly used by riggers. So if you wanted to make certain things that an animator wanted to see based off of your rig, this is where you would turn things off and on. Our show here is a little bit like view. What would you like to be able to see over here in your outliner and in here? And then help is pretty standard. What do we want to look up? Should we have any questions inside of here? What's some mel commands that you could know? Python, node attributes, things like that. Questions on those before we look at some of the other ones? They're all pretty standard, right? Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
So next we're going to take a look at keys. So keys are pretty neat. This is where you can add and insert keys without ever having to touch up inside the top half of the graph editor or of Maya editor. I have no idea why on earth you would ever need to know that. However, foreshadowing. So in keys, there's two different tools that we'll mostly look at. We have insert key tool and add key tool. There's also convert different things to keys, convert to breakdowns, add in-betweens, remove in-betweens, mute keys, and unmute keys. So mute key pretty much says, hey, this section of my graph editor is a little bit too convoluted. There's too much going on. I want to mute it and see if that's where my problem is. You can mute your key. So if I have a keyframe, let's see here, I'm going to insert a key with my key tool. I'm going to make sure I'm in the correct translate X. I'm going to middle click to add a key. So this is how the add insert key tool works, is you can just middle click on a graph or just left click once that graph is selected and it'll just do its thing. So if I'm like, hey, this key right here, I want it to do something wonky like that. And if I'm like, I really don't like, oh, did I turn my channel off? There we go, I did. So if I'm like, I really don't like this back and forth that's right here, I can highlight this key, come over here to keys and be like, hey, mute that key. So now for just this one key, it doesn't move. Okay. So we also have, so insert key, this is just a really quick way to insert a key on a specific channel. So if I wanted to come over here to my translate Y and be like, hey, I want to insert a key somewhere on this channel here, maybe in the middle, to make so that I can raise or lower it. That works really nice. However, you can't maneuver or move your key once you've added it with insert key. You would have to change and exit the tool and go to the move tool to move it. However, the add key tool is a little different. When you use the add key tool, if you middle click and continue to keep your mouse depressed, it'll allow you to automatically move your key where you need it to in real time. That way you don't have to switch tools to go back and forth. I find that using the insert key tool is really good if I would just want to add an extra key between two keys, especially if I don't want to move it or I know I might move it later. I find that the add key tool works really well for creating new movement. Questions at all about these tools at all? How they work?
If you insert a key, is there a way to insert it with its tangents already broken? So you broke them to mess with your curves?
No.
Okay. You would just do that after inserting the key?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next section here, I'm going to add a couple of keys to here. Now, if you do have this turned on, it should automatically break your keys as you're going, but sometimes it doesn't work. And I don't know if that's just this newest version of 2020.2, or if it's just like a weird it happens to me a lot glitch. But be aware, that is something that is like possible, is to have that on.
Okay, that's pretty much what I was asking.
So tangents, these are all the different types of curves that you can create inside of the graph editor. So this is all your different types of eases and outs. So auto is the standard. This is the one that everything's automatically set to. So I'm just going to highlight these two curves I created in here. Spline will make them a little bit more curved toward each other. It's like a more angled, slight curve. Our linear is that straight on line. Our clamped works a little bit in the same way as spline, except it only has your tangents going out at the same length. So you can see this one got a little longer compared to this side. These sides are the same size as this. We have our stepped. This is where the motion stays the same. It doesn't shift. So you can see I get to this keyframe, there's no movement till I get to the next keyframe. First, we're not going to see anything because I'm in the front view. There's no XY motion. We then have step next. That works a little bit in the opposite direction, holds it still in its position. We have our flattened curve. This is another type of spline, nice eases and ins and outs all the way across. We have a fixed rate, same thing. Just, you can tell that my handles here got just a little bit bigger. And then plateau does about the same as well. They're just different types of hoops. Now, all of those buttons are also all of these right here. So if I wanted to go to my straight line, it's this button. Auto is here. And all the different types of clamped. Now, you can also do an in. These are new buttons. So your in can do spline or linear. And your out, so you can see how it's set to straight. And your out is auto or spline, clamped. It's just a different way of doing it, but it won't do it consistently. They're finally updating the graph editor and some things don't work. It's been like 6 years since they've added anything to it. Okay. Does everyone kind of understand how the tangents work, what they look like? Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Awesome. They're pretty self-explanatory. And most of the work that you'll be doing with tangents in general, you'll be breaking them and making them maneuver regardless. So let's start looking at some of the tools further in here. So up here, if I select this keyframe right here, we have our stats. So this is the frame that we're on. So I could be like, hey, I want this frame right here to be on frame 25. You can change that to immediately go to frame 25 just by clicking on a number. So if you know you've got one that's just in the wrong spot or it needs to be a little lower or higher, you can manually come in here and change this. And it'll shift. Now this next number is its value. So if I'm like, I know I want this to be at a standard negative 100, I can click that and it'll pop my keyframe up. If I'm like, no, I really need that to be like negative 900, I can click on that and it'll automatically send it down to the negative 900. So if you're having issues getting a certain key to go to a certain value, you can manually pop in the number you're looking for. Now, let's say you have shifted this around in here, and you have your keyframe, and it's at this decimal number. This is why, remember from the principles courses and things like that, where we say, hey, make sure you snap your keyframes so you don't get decimals. Pretty much how this works is when you're working in decibels, you're kind of working in sub-steps. So it's saying, hey, every point, whatever, recalculate what we're doing. We really like that when we're doing things like simulations. However, when we're working in animation, this can sometimes make things difficult. Sometimes you can get the multiple keyframes all on that same keyframe because they're all at different decimals. So if you ever notice that you get these, so if I click on this keyframe here, you'll see I'm at 17.54 with a little asterisk. That means I'm in a decimal value. It's to alert me that something looks different. If I'm like, no, I really need this to be on a whole number, I can come over here and change that to 17. Same with this one. So if I notice it's at 9.8, I can also do that, click and drag and snap, and it'll take it to that closest value. Now, if you ever work for a really big name company, something like Pixar or Light Magic, Industrial Light Magic, sometimes you will be animating in between keyframes to get those little tiny human subtle movements. You should never have to worry about doing that in this class, at least. We'll mention it a little bit when we start doing character stuff. But this would be for really tiny subtle changes like shifts in the knuckles, ever so slight dimples forming, things like that. But for right now, you don't have to worry about working in decimals. Just be aware that they're there. That's kind of what they're used for. And this is how to remove them or add them as needed. So moving further down, this button right here will make your entire viewport be visible. This is also the F key, that focus. This button here will set it a little bit more in center, and this one will add it a little bit closer to here. So if I were to zoom in quite far and click this button, it'll refocus everything. That's just how to change your viewport in your graph editor. Further down, we know that these keys right here change how our little handles here work, our tangents. If I turn this one right here on, this one turns off. So this is the keep it in line. This allows you to break it so you can make multiple different shapes. This is a lock tangent. Locks them together so they can't zoom in or out. They can still rotate, but that's about it. So now I can break it, but they don't get shorter or longer. Whereas here, wrong button. I could expand this in or out. So if you know you don't need your tangent to be longer or shorter or make a more, wrong button. Like, see how this has this hoop? This is because of the length of my tangent point here. If I turn this off and pull this in, I can make it shorter or longer. What this does is locks it to say I can't change that. From here, this is our rules and guidelines. This allows us to snap to different things. This allows us to see different guides on the side. So you can see that gets rid of that one. This gets rid of that one. So we see only in one direction. So those are pretty neat. Other tools you might need to know that are a little bit more entertaining and interesting. I'm going to switch to my translate. I'm going to add a couple of keys in here. Just so we can see some motion. Why are we not seeing motion? Weird. I think I have broken it. Oh well. So anyway, so what this does is it pretty much says, hey, I'm broke, can't do nothing. So we have some tools over here. This first tool right here is called the retiming tool. It's real neat. It says, hey, if I double click here, I can drag to reposition my overall timeline. If I double click further in the back, I can expand or contract my timeline to make it go faster or slower. And if I know I want this keyframe to happen sooner, I can double click about where I would want that motion here to slow down. Double click there. And I can slow things down or speed things up as needed. So that's cool, right? That's neat. You can also turn things off or on just by clicking these little X's right here. This next tool is just the region tool. This kind of works like the transform tool in Photoshop. So you could be like, I know I really want this to come up a little bit. I need it to exaggerate, go a little further. Maybe I need this to happen a little sooner. This happens even sooner than this. You can manually change things as though you're transforming and warping the overall keyframes. The tool after this one, or this middle tool, is the lattice tool. This one works a little bit more like a freeform transform. So I can take this little handle here, pull this down, shift this one over, pull this in, take that one further in, really kind of maneuver things to get them how I want them to look. The next one is move nearest key. This one, move the nearest key. So I can say, hey, I want to come over here. I'm going to click on my curve. Why is nothing working? I have broken it. Let's just start this one from scratch. This key here, this button, this is just that insert key. So I can add keys quite quickly with this button. Now we're moving. So this key here is just the move nearest. So if I click on my curve and have this selected, come on, I can automatically move my key that's closest to where I've clicked. It's being very buggy though. Normally I just click somewhere like in this area and it picks the closest one. This is very weird. I don't like it. There we go. So you can see I can just manually start moving things just by having my mouse closest to that key. So like I said, this one here is an insert key tool. It's this tool right here. So it's the tool that you can't automatically move by holding down your middle button. You do have to go into the move tool to move your key. Does anyone have any questions at all? Need more clarification for any of the tools or the graph editor in general? Anything at all? Any reservations about the graph editor buttons?
Did you go over all the mouse shortcuts for like moving and zooming inside of the graph editor?
So they're all actually the same as what's up here. So anytime you hold down Alt middle mouse, you can pan around, zoom in and out. Move is still middle click on your keyframe. F will still focus on your keyframe you've got selected, but if you don't have anything, it'll focus your whole graph. A focuses the whole thing. And then these tools right here also work as your focus and see everything.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all the same. Nothing's changed too much. Okay. So let's do that pop quiz. So it's not really a pop quiz. I'm just going to be asking you guys questions. And there's only 5 of you, so if no one answers, I'm just going to start talking to people at random, making you answer which one it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of these boxes, and we're going to guess which type of splining it has. And then at the end, we'll go back and look at it to see what the curves look like. So let's take a look at this first box here. What kind of spline in the graph editor do you think that one is? Very top. You can blurt it out, you can type it in the chat.
It's a straight line. It has one steady speed, so it's going like in a straight line.
Okay, anyone else?
Like just generic, whenever you have start frame and end frame and you don't really mess with anything, you just let Maya do its thing.
What about this second one here? What is the second one doing?
It has a faster startup, but is slower altogether at the end. I forgot what it's called.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm gonna turn these letters on so it's a little easier for you guys to see. What about C here? What is C doing?
C is zooming.
It is zooming.
Sorry, I'm awful with names.
That's okay.
Hey, me too. High five.
It starts really fast and eases into where it finishes, so it slows down at the end. It's probably like a big curve that kind of flattens out a little before it actually reaches the last keyframe.
What about D?
It's flattened out at the beginning and has a sharp curve at the end, I'm assuming.
Okay.
If I got that correct. I have no idea. It's been a minute since I did graph.
What about E?
It looks like there's another key in the middle.
It's got the stepped splining.
Okay.
It goes in like a straight line right at the start and then smooths out into a curve.
Okay. What about F?
For me, at least, F just seems like a more drastic version of E.
This is where they start getting a little tricky. What about G?
That one's got like a wave where it goes really high up and then really far down so that it goes backwards in the graph editor.
What about H?
That's the delayed one. I forgot what it was called. It's the one where it doesn't move until it reaches the next key.
Okay. What about I?
I is hitting a wall at the end and bouncing back.
Ah, yes, just like my hopes and dreams.
And then what about J?
Jay wanted that head start, but it kind of just got bounced back. Karma.
It goes past the end too, so it's got a different keyframe.
So y'all guessed pretty good. You got a couple of wrong. That's all right. Mostly your terms are just a little off. That's okay because you don't know them all yet. So here's what the trail of each one looks like. So you can see where they slow down and where they speed up. So we'll just watch through them a couple times. If you want to change any of your answers, feel free to shout them out. Are there any that you thought were a little different?
I'm still waking up, so my memory's already jogged as is.
That's okay. I haven't
I
had
think
my
the one that I said was stepped is not actually stepped.
So let's take a look at their individual graph editors. I'm going to turn this back to animation. So our cube here, this is A. So this is the standard ease in, ease out, very basic that Maya puts on everything. So you can see it kind of slows down at the beginning, kind of slows down at the end, nice and kind of constant to the middle. Very generic. Then we have B. Hello. There we go. B is the constant. This is the one that goes just straight from side A to side B. Got a nice even movement all the way across. C eases out, so it eases the closer. So it eases here. This would be easing in. So it has a greater hoop over here. D is the opposite. It eases in, so it slows down as it goes into the next keyframe. Good way to remember it. Eases out from the first, eases into the next. E is a little different. It eases into the middle, so that it has a slow in and a slow out, or slow out, slow in, with a slightly faster middle or slower middle. So you can see how it really pauses here in the middle. F has an extra keyframe, so it'll kind of hover to the center. So you guys are right. It's E, but with one extra keyframe. So you can see it's got the standard, kind of pauses for a second, and then continues on. G has a bit of a wiggle that you guys mentioned. It bounces back and forth as it goes up and down. H is the stair step. It snaps to each new location based off of the keyframes. There's no slowing in, there's no slowing out. Just steps to the next part. Then we have I. I rebounds against that invisible wall and bounces. It's kind of like what you guys did for the balls that you made and the balloon for project 1. And then we have J, which overshoots and then undershoots. So it winds up, goes over, and then comes back a little bit. So it does have extra keyframes. Any questions on these? Now that you're seeing how they work with their motion path and with their graph, do they all kind of make sense a little bit more, a little bit easier to see and understand?
It's kind of hard to tell on the zoom, but are the green things in the viewer the frame numbers?
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. It is a bit harder to see all nice and tiny. Word of wisdom. If you memorize which ones these are, I think Greg actually gives a test on it in the class after this one. We share this file.
I'm gonna watch this recording. Write it down.
So, what are some curve types? There's no right or wrong answer here. What are some curve types that you guys would use to make a rushed movement? That's something you would use.
What do you mean by rushed?
So if you have a character and they need to like rush and grab something, what kind of curve do you think would make that have a more rushed motion? Like a quick snap to grab something.
Probably C.
I could see C working. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. You can say whatever you like. Whatever you think best shows a quick motion.
Either C or I from my view.
I could see I, yeah, or C.
Coming from a very clumsy person, I'm looking at G and thinking, yeah, that's rushing to do something and then realizing you're doing it wrong.
I see that. I see that. What about like a slow and languid motion? Maybe someone's like a zombie, or maybe someone's really tired. What kind of curves do you think would pull that across?
F.
Mm-hmm. F would be a good one. Are there any others?
Maybe like E, or kind of hangs in one spot for a while.
Yeah. What if you had a jerky or robotic kind of motion? Which one would you think would be a nice kind of curve for something like that?
H.
H. Any others? What about I? Would I work for kind of robotic? Jerky motion?
It could.
Mm-hmm. H. Someone said H. So we can kind of start to see how we would want to change our curve based on what type of motion we're looking for, right? So let's take a look at your homework. So if you haven't, go ahead and open up that graph editor arrow Maya binary file that I gave you guys off D2L. And let's just take a look at it on here. Once you've got it up and running, just let me know. Is there anyone whose Maya hasn't opened yet with the file?
Mine's ready.
I do not have Maya on this computer currently, so.
Okay. Are you going to be able to get it on the computer, or are you going to come into the labs to work in Maya stuff?
I'm going to come into labs.
Cool.
I was going to come there this morning, but I kind of overslept and woke up like 10 minutes before class started.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was going to go later today and
That's all good.
do all the work.
So long as you'll have access to it, it's all I'm making sure of.
Yeah.
All right. So on D2L, you don't have to open it up if you don't want to. Under our table of contents, our content here, under assignments, I already have all your assignments laid out here. The dates may or may not be different. But there's this section called exercises. And exercise 1 here, that was your little job paper. But the second page here is your exercise 2, and this is the homework that's tonight. So what I want you guys to do is, a lot of people are scared of the graph editor. It's something that holds a lot of animators back. They don't want to be, they don't want to go into it. The fear of failure is there, and most of the fear of failure stems from just not understanding how the graph editor works. We've explained it a little bit to you guys today. You guys seem to have the first inklings of how to use it. So now I'm going to put that to the test. What I want you to do is, using this Maya file that I have given you, I want you to use only the graph editor to have this arrow move through all these hoops, go through that loop-de-loop, and hit that bullseye without ever using the S key or your move tools inside of your viewport. So what that means is you can zoom in here just so you can see. You can tumble, but you can't use the W, E, R, or S key with your arrow. So how on earth are you to do this thing that seems mildly impossible? Well, I've gone ahead and given you 2 keyframes. Ooh, super fast. So I've given you the first keyframe and the very last keyframe. Takes you just directly through to the target. And if we notice, all of our keyframes are those standard Maya automatically generated splines. So when you have this, the last time the S key to set keyframe should have been used are the ones that I've created for you. What you're going to do is create any new keyframes you might possibly need or want, all inside of here using that add key tool and insert key tool. You can then, depending on where on your graph you are, move that using the move tools down here. You can break any key tangents you need. You can slide them. You can compress them. You can make it go faster or slower. You can make your arrow look scared. Make it all nice and jittery if you want. You can do whatever you want, but it does have to go through all the hoops and that loop-de-loop. Questions on what is due before I walk you guys through that first hoop? Seems pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay. So how you will achieve this is I highly recommend going into your front view and figuring out at what point on your timeline does your arrow intercept your hoop. You can then insert a key, probably on your translate Y here. So if I add a key, middle click, and drag, I can position that key where I want it. I can then go into my translate, depending on which one I need, set another key, come up here to my move tool, and move that tool so that it's inside of my key or my circle here. Remember, I don't want you to move with these tools here. You need to move with your graph editor. Panning and shifting as needed. So now my arrow starts here, goes into my hoop. I would then use it to do the same thing for my second one. Come over here, see where they intercept, add a key, and shift these keys as needed. Question? this making sense for everyone on what you're going to be doing? Anyone have any questions? Okay. Since there doesn't seem to be questions, the way I'm going to check to see if you've hit the S key or hit any of the other WERT keys is you're going to be turning me in a render of your video. It can be the quickest render you want. You can do it in Maya software. You can change the materials of things if you'd like. You can do it as a smaller file format, so long as it's still at that 1080.
It's hardware 2.0, okay.
Yeah, so long as
Okay.
it looks neat. You got to change the textures a little bit. Does need to be rendered, but I also want you to turn into me your Maya file, because I'm going to be checking your script editor, which will tell me which keys you've pressed at any given point. So that's all there is today. Feel free to spend the rest of the class time. I'm trying to give you guys about 30 minutes to an hour of in-class time to work on this. That way you shouldn't have any homework if you don't want to. I'll be on Zoom till the end of class unless everyone disappears. So if you do have a question or a problem that arises, you can come and talk to me. A word of wisdom before you start that a lot of people have had problems with. If I come over here to my front view, because I do not want you to use your rotate tools, when you come over here to your rotate, and this rotate Y, if I add a new key right here, and I go to move this key, you can see it's moving quite nicely. If you move that key and it does not move nicely, whether that be in this rotate X or Y, if I add a key here, see how I'm moving this and it's not moving at all? If you look over here at my channel box, when I move that, oops, wrong button, this one. It is moving in 0.001 decimals. I highly recommend, if you're going to rotate it, to go up or down in your rotate X or Z. You click this first one here and you manually change your number to a whole number. This will now allow you to rotate it, but you can see it's only rotating slightly. You might have to add an even larger number, like 50, so that you can actually get a rotate that you're looking for. Questions?
Just a clarification of when this is due.
This is due by next class,
Alrighty.
Wednesday.
Is Friday still
Okay.
lab day?
Hold on, what day is it? Today's Wednesday, it's due Monday.
Okay.
Due Monday.
Okay. I thought you actually meant by tonight, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
rendering.
I got
The
real
render part
nervous
was
for
what
a
I was
second.
afraid of.
I would never do that.
I was
Never do that. No,
about to say,
next class, Friday's a work day. I don't know what day it is of the week. I don't see any physical bodies around, so
Ugh.
I've seen 5 physical students all semester so far.
I was gonna go in this morning, but then I woke up late. I was like, well, I'm not gonna drive there.
No, it's good. It's fine.
I'll be there Monday though.
All right, any other questions? Let's do next class. Not Friday, Monday. I'll never have anything due Friday, ever.
Woo!
I turn in a revision, just FYI.
Yay!
That seems silly to me. Unless we miss a class for some whatever reason, like if I get sick or if somebody, like, if something just comes through and destroys the DMC, we might have to have a Friday class.
Mm.
Okay. If there's no questions, I'm going to turn off my share and I'm going to stop my recording.